Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast, and you can check us out on YouTube. I'm Blair Kirchhoff, and we're talking Royals with beat writer Jaylon Thompson and columnist Vahe Gregorian. It was good seeing you both last night at the K, but not a good night for the Royals. They lost their fourth straight, including three in a row, to these hard-charging Detroit Tigers. You know, the Royals have been baseball's feel-good story all year, and they're still favored to make the postseason for the first time since 2015. But I think they'd all have felt a little better if they could have won at least one from the Tigers. So, Jaylon, I'll let you kick it off. What's the confidence level with these Royals right now? How are they feeling? They're in a little slide, and they've got 10 left.
Yeah, when you look at what the Royals are doing right now, it's kind of funny because if you ever went to a casino or to Las Vegas, you know that when you have house money, you feel good. You feel like, oh, if I lose a couple, it's just they gave it to me. I'm playing free, playing loose. But now that you get down to it and you're the Royals, you're like, well, we were where we wanted to be. Now we want to actually want to make the playoffs. It was all fun when we were winning games and exceeding expectations. Now it's time to really get there. And they're kind of stumbling. They're kind of stuttering at the moment. And, you know, in the clubhouse, everyone will say the right things. Well, there's no pressure. And we're just going to play and take the today mantra that Matt Quatrell has preached constantly since he's got the job. But you can really sense it in there that a lot of guys are feeling it. They know where they are. They know how close they are with nine games left. And, you know, it's dicey right now. So I don't know. The confidence level is kind of wavering, but they still control their own destiny and they have a chance to potentially achieve those playoff dreams. But playing with house money, this is what happens.
Blair, I would just add that a couple things. One is that I think I've got this math right. They could go 5-4 in these last games and match the record for the biggest turnaround after 100+ loss season in baseball history, and now maybe not make the playoffs. Probably it would require a lot of things, you know, some 9-0s from other teams and things like that. But it is kind of the position they've played themselves into now, that they're sagging right when they need to be peaking. And I'm reminded of what Ned Yost was saying down the stretch in 2014 when the Royals were kind of in and out of it and, you know, just hoping they could eke into the wild card. Nobody knows what's going to happen. That was Ned's rallying cry. I think he meant it usually as, you know, don't get too down. But I think the point really was nobody knows what's going to happen. The other thing I just say, this kind of related to Jaylon's point, you know, I asked Matt Quatrell last night about if he had any sense of guys squeezing the bats too hard. And I don't know if I'd say he shot it down exactly, but it was pretty reflexive. I don't think he was really wanting to share that thought, bottom line. And one thing I noticed after the 7-game losing streak is that it was after that everybody was willing to kind of say, yeah, it's tough on your confidence when that happens. I remember Paul DeYoung talking about that you do tend to try too hard because everybody wants to be a hero. And I spoke with Hunter Renfroe at one point, and he said, no matter what anybody told you, it's demoralizing. So I think it's reasonable to say that all those thoughts are in there when you have this happen, especially when you have it happen late. The last part of this I'll just add is that JJ Picollo, the general manager, made a pretty good point one of the recent days when we're all speaking to him in the dugout. During that 7-game losing streak, really all you need is to end the streak. Win one, everything looks a little different. And it sounds very simplistic, but it does snap the streak. It snaps the funk. It resets, and it kind of just recalibrates everything. So I'm struck by the fact that it all circles back to the Q mantra today. They really need to win. They really needed to win yesterday. That was one of the first times this season I felt like they really need this one. And now I think that intensifies Friday. It won't undo them if they lose, but they really need to win.
And I'll throw in this point too, Vahe and Blair. Yesterday, we really got for the first time a sense of these guys are tired. They have said, we just need a day of rest to reset and get back out there. I think the season has really got to them. I mean, it's September, and everyone is going to be tired. But for these guys, they've been pushing so hard since really June, trying to just make this run and catch the Guardians and stay in the playoff picture. And yeah, I think a day off will do them some good today.
Yeah, day off and then coming back home.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think every team's going through that, but I do think that this is a welcome day for a day off. So much so that Salvi late last night made a point to wish the media a happy day off today too.
So they end that 7-game losing streak, and then they turn around and win. I think it was the Twins and the Pirates were the next teams that they played, and put together a successful little run then. And then the Detroit Tigers come to town. And how much of this can we attribute to just running into a buzzsaw of a team right now, a Tigers team that's won 25 of its last 30, they're 25-10 in their last 35, steamrolling toward what might be an improbable playoff berth for Detroit. Maybe they just got unlucky with the schedule and met the wrong team at the wrong time. And the team that we'll see play the Giants for 3 over the weekend to end the home schedule, and then go to Washington and Atlanta to finish the regular season. Maybe that team will be more like the team that that played the Twins and the Pirates really well and ended that to end that 7-game losing streak, and let somebody else deal with the Tigers right now. I was a little discouraged with the the Marsh start on Tuesday or on Wednesday. he had pitched well in his previous outing. The Royals get the one great start in this series from Cole Reagans in Game 2, and could not finish the job. Lose that game in 10 innings. Vahe, you said they really needed last night. I think they needed one of those 3 from the Tigers. If they had just, how different would the standings look if they had just won one of those 3, and the Tigers had only picked up 1 game on the Royals instead of 3 as they did. So that's
yeah. Well, I just agree. I mean, I just had come to the point last night where they hadn't won those 2, so it felt, I think, even heavier. But I agree with you. Just one of them breaks it up a little bit, because what you have now is the Tigers aren't just surging; they're kind of in the Royals' grill. I mean, they're not right there, but I think the way I referred to it and what I wrote for this morning was that it's kind of a little bit of a muddled clump. It looks like it could change, right? But as of right now, it's basically 3 American League Central teams fighting for 2 spots, the last 2 wildcard spots. I mean, that's kind of what it's going to break down to. And again, with a couple games in either direction, that could look a lot different. It's just how the nature of the beast. But as we speak today, that's the deal. And that's why you needed, it seemed like the most evident possibility was to ride Reagans to the win. They get the grand slam Monday and get a 4-0 lead, and the bullpen can't hold it. So it's just kind of these leaks all over the place right now. But the common thread is they're not scoring runs. And to your point on this, Blair, they are running into some pitching. But I guess I don't take any comfort in that for them, because I think while we know each matchup will be different, they're going to run into pitching. And what I'm wondering about with the Tigers is if we can get our arms around the fact that sometimes it's another town's team that has destiny on its side, and we just don't know. But if you're a Detroit fan right now, you're feeling pretty thrilled, right? You're suddenly right in it, and you gotta be in the hot hand as the month of September advances toward October.
That's not fair. They're the team of destiny. That's not the way the script's supposed to unfold.
By the way, one last quick thing. I use the term all the time about, controlling destiny and controlling fate. But I think if you look it up, actually the definition of destiny and fate mean that you have nothing to do with it.
Can't control
it. It's all pre-written. So I guess we should say they control what they control. But and that's powerful too, right? They do have to control what they can control.
Yeah, I think if you really think about it, the Tigers, I wouldn't just say that they're fighting for the final 2 spots. They could potentially get that first wild card spot. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but they have 3 games with the Baltimore Orioles, who own the first wildcard spot this weekend. And the Orioles are 2-8 in their last 10 games, I believe. So if the Tigers can catch it or win that series against the Orioles, then they have the Tampa Bay Rays and Chicago White Sox to end the season. So that's 3 victories at the end of the year that you can pretty much put on the board for the Tigers. So the Royals really have to win these last 3 series and put themselves in position, because you do not want to be, if the Tigers continue to surge, then they take a spot fighting with the Orioles and the Twins for those last 2 wildcard spots, because now you're relying on a tiebreaker that you didn't really get, that you got with the Twins. I'm sorry. And then you're like, well, what's next? And the Orioles, they already own that tiebreaker. You split with them. So it's like I said, it's dicey, and the Tigers are a team that is playing high. And like an old baseball adage said, it doesn't matter what your record is. It's about when you play the games and how hot you are down the stretch. So,
well, we've already mentioned the Royals' remaining schedule, and Jaylon, you just mentioned the Tigers with they got the Orioles, Rays, and White Sox to finish the season. Well, let's throw out the other 2, and I'm going to include Baltimore here because I don't think Baltimore's out of the woods. They're going to be in the playoffs, but they're falling, as you said. So the Orioles have a game today. We're recording this on Thursday morning. Baltimore finishes up a series against the Giants. The Giants have already won the first 2 of those games. And then Baltimore has, as you mentioned, Detroit. And then they're at the New York Yankees. And then they finish up with the Twins. So they've got Giants, Tigers, Yankees, Twins. That's Baltimore's remaining schedule. The Twins finish a series with the Guardians. So they get 1 left with Cleveland, and then they're at Boston, then have the Miami Marlins, and then the Orioles. So of the group, the remaining schedules for the contending teams, the Royals have 1 series against a team that I think will continue to be motivated, and that's the final 3 against the Braves. They're playing for playoff position. Tigers certainly with the Orioles, but that's the 1 series they have left with a team in contention. Minnesota has the Orioles at the end of the season. Baltimore, I think, might have the toughest road with the Tigers and the Yankees and the Twins. Those are 3 opponents that are, that not only in the playoffs but have something to play for. And I don't think any of this American League pennant race is going to come down to resting starters. I think everybody's going to be playing full out here in the last week of the season. I don't know of the sense you get. We know the Royals are going to have to do that, right? Mm-hmm. They're not adjusting their rotation to be in an advantageous position in the postseason.
And I think that's concerning, Blair, if you really think about it, because in that last series, if the Royals have to play out the entire stretch, you're going to have to either burn Seth Lugo and Cole Ragans to potentially even get in the playoffs. Then that puts you at a disadvantage, because now you're going to have to probably use Michael Wacha or Brady Singer or whoever. If Michael Lorenzen's back, one of those guys, they don't really have a lot of playoff experience. And I'm talking about Brady Singer. And do you really want to rely on Brady in a game that matters so much? And, I know he's been great this year, but the playoffs are a different animal. And so I think it'll behoove the Royals to try to win these next 6 games before you get to Atlanta and be in a position to clinch before then, so that you can save your top pitchers. Because if you go into a wild card series, if it's Baltimore, if it's Detroit, and they're throwing out Terry Skubal and Corbin Burns, and you're throwing out Michael Wacha, you trust Michael Wacha, but that could be a long day for your offense.
Well, I don't think the Royals would be favored in those matchups, especially on the road. But I think they do feel good. I think they would feel good if Wacha's been a pretty good second. He's been really good in the second half, and certainly Reagan's having one of the really good years in Royals pitching history with his strikeout total, already number 3 all time when it comes in single season strikeouts. And if Lugo's name is in the playoffs, I would feel good with him as well. In fact, I know Reagan's was good against the Tigers last time out. Lugo was not, but I just felt great about his start in New York, his previous start. He pitched so well against the Yankees. But the rotation has been so important to this team all year. It's been among the best in baseball, one of the best in Royals history with these guys. They would have some decisions to make, and in an ideal world, Jaylon, if the Royals could set up their rotation for the playoffs, how would you think they'd go?
I think you have to go with Seth Lugo, Cole Riggins, and Michael Wacha. Now, the order of that, I think it will depend on what you want to, how you want to do it. But maybe you go with Cole Riggins to start off as the game one starter, and then you sandwich Lugo and Wacha behind him. That way, you give yourselves a chance with your two veterans if you need it in a must-win game. But I think those are the three you have to go with, at least for the wild card to start it off.
I mean, that sounds to me like a virtual certainty. I mean, it is an interesting X factor about, what that means for Brady Singer. But I think those are the three that you almost have to do based on experience and effectiveness this season, the combination of it. And, Lugo and Wacha both have postseason experience, which I think can't be shortchanged, especially with a team that has a fair amount of younger guys. One of the things, it's just a minor side point, but I do think it could serve the Royals well in this stretch. I think there's a perception that, entering the season, people were more conscious of the fact that, Salvy's the only guy who's been around from those last two World Series teams. And you tend to connect that to the thought of he's the only Royal that's been in the playoffs. And obviously that's changed radically with the roster makeover. It's 10 guys on the currently active roster have playoff experience. I think 6, at least 3 or 4 have World Series experience. And then there's 4 of the 6 guys that are on the injured list that have postseason experience. That room is teeming with, postseason experience. How that translates to actual influence on the rest of the team, is it calming? Is it educating? Is it mentoring? I don't know how to make that tangible, but I do think that it's just objectively a good thing that they have that, and certainly you want to emphasize that in your starting rotation as best you can.
Yes, they won't be wide-eyed going into the postseason. I think as a team, I think they'll be prepared. Listen, the way the Royals are constructed with the starting pitching as strong as it is. That's what you want going. You want a solid rotation and top line starters going into the postseason. I'm a little concerned about the bullpen. Pitched really well in the finale against Detroit. Daniel Lynch, especially, and we've seen some good outings from Bubic here. Where do things stand, Jaylon, with the bullpen? I know there's MacArthur's on the injured reserve. Is this? Are they in decent shape bullpen-wise going down the stretch?
So the bullpen is something that a lot of people haven't really talked about, and I think it should deserve more attention. So I'm glad you brought it up, Blair. They have a lot of guys that are injured. The veterans that we just talked about, the Will Smiths, the Chris Strattons, the Hunter Harveys, James MacArthur, those are guys they counted on all year, and now they're on the sideline. Matt Quatrero said that Will Smith and Michael Lorenzen will both be throwing a bullpen session on Saturday. So to see how they are and if they can, get where they need to get to potentially to come back. But you're talking about 9 games left, and James MacArthur is going to be down for 5 to 7 days because he has a right elbow strain. You don't know if Chris Stratton's going to be back with his right forearm flexor strain. They said they're grade 1, and I guess that's minor in medical terms, but you're missing days where you're not throwing. And when you're going to a playoffs, you have to be sharp. You have to be on it. And I don't know if the Royals will get those guys back. We don't know if Hunter Harvey is going to come back. He's still dealing with that back tightness, and he's getting injections and trying to loosen it up and everything like that. But he just hasn't really progressed like they wanted him to. Will Smith, he's progressing, but maybe he might be the closest one to come back. So yeah, it's a big concern. And as much as we love Daniel Lynch and what he's done and what Sam Long and Chris Bubic have done, you don't want to go into the playoffs relying on Steven Cruz and Carlos Hernandez. Those are just young guys that are still trying to find their way in the big leagues. And when it's close games like that, you need your arms, you need your horses, and they're on the sideline right now.
I also tend to just sort of think backwards from Lucas Erceg, who's really emerged. I know he lost the game the other night. There were some circumstances involved that, maybe weren't all together, on his shoulders. But I think you can say you feel good about Lucas Erceg. The thing that's, if we're picturing a 3 games in 3 days scenario, though, I think it's pretty rare that you can decide you can use a guy 3 days in a row. I guess you could if it's for the season, but that to me is a little bit of a point of concern, because I think their best case scenarios are somehow getting 7 out of the 3 starters each game, and then what is the gap between that starter and Erceg? Mm-hmm. And I do I'm pretty enamored of what Lynch has been doing, because it's not just that he's getting outs. I mean, gosh, he struck out 4 in a row at one point yesterday. He looks so at ease and in command. He knows it's fragile and that can change, but I think that's been that to me said more last night than or said as much or more than Alec Marsh's worrisome start. I think what it did for me was make me think, if you're talking about bullpen roles, last night we saw why Daniel Lynch should be more of a factor than Alec Marsh in any of that. The X factor, and maybe I haven't thought this through enough, which is why I'm turning it to you guys. What are you doing with Brady Singer in a 3-game series? If he's not starting a game, don't you see him as a resource that can help bridge some gaps? Or what do you do?
I think you put him in the bullpen. I really do. And I think he has one of those roles where he's the break in case of emergency player, break glass in case of emergency player. Like, say if you have Michael Wacha out there and Michael Wacha is floundering, he's giving up 2 runs and it's a close game, you go right to Brady Singer and you bring him in. Or if Cole Reagans is having an off game, you do the same thing. He's the first guy you go to, because he can give you those innings. He can kind of sell things down, and you take the pressure off of him because he wasn't starting the game to begin with. So that's just my thoughts on the whole thing. I don't think you'll see him in late inning situations.
Yeah, I don't know about late inning. I just wondered if he's, there's a 6, 7, 8 type role for him. Blair, I'm suddenly reminded of Yordano Ventura in the wild card game against the A's. Didn't go well.
It did not, bringing the starter in, and that nearly got Ned Yost fired. That was a disaster. But all's well that ends well for that game, that evening, and that postseason.
That's true.
But I think if you're looking at candidates for that role, I think that's what Bubic and Lynch would be, and or Lynch. If things are not going well for, Lugo or Reagans or Wacha, whoever's starting, and then you're in the 4th, or say in like last night's game, Marsh didn't get out of the 3rd. That's when you bring in, you don't necessarily need to bring in Marsh or Singer, whoever, might be in the bullpen that night. You've got length, interestingly enough, with Lynch and with Bubic. Now it's left-handed, but it may not matter at this point. You're not both being left-handed. So I think the Royals are going to be okay when it comes to starter, then maybe emergency long relief guy to Erceg. It's that before Erceg, after starter, after emergency relief guy that where I'm a little, that's where they've used Sam Long and others, as Jaylon mentioned. So, all right. We had an interesting dinner conversation last night at the game. Vahe and I did. You were downstairs working, Jaylon, as always. We were talking about MVP, and Jeff Passan, our friend who works at ESPN, lives in Kansas City, national baseball writer. We were just mulling over the Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt argument for MVP. Jeff thinks that Judge will be the MVP. I think he'll end up being the MVP as well. But there's no doubt that Bobby Witt Jr. is having one of the great seasons in Royals history. And and if he got some votes for most valuable player, I think that would be kind of an accurate portrayal and a good reflection of what what the situation is. Judge isn't having so much better year than Bobby Witt that Witt should be ignored on MVP balloting. I can see Bobby Witt getting some first place votes. So it'd be great if Witt had it was having a September as good as his July and August. That's not the case, and we referred to the offensive woes recently of the Royals. Some of that is Bobby Witt. I think he's hitting 246 in the month heading into the weekend series. So just will the playoffs be just another opportunity? This sounds obvious. Another opportunity for Bobby Witt to establish himself on a national level, Jaylon?
I think so. And I agree with you. I think Aaron Judge will win the MVP, AL MVP. But I was pondering this as you were talking, and I was thinking, Bobby just got his second 30-30 season. He just eclipsed 100 RBIs for the first time in his career. He's hitting over 330, basically as his batting average. And it seems like it's not a hard labor for him. It's easy. It's effortless. Like, he can do this again next year and maybe the year after that. And when you look at Aaron Judge, he's hitting 50, 60 home runs, but you're not going to do that every year. You're not going to hit 50 home runs in 312, 320 every year. So he's having such a historic year by his standards that he deserves the MVP. But Bobby looks like he can consistently do this every single year. And I think that bodes well for him to win a future MVP, maybe 2 or 3, because he's at a streamlined level where this is just what Bobby Witt Jr. does. Aaron Judge, he's at an all-time historic level right now. That won't probably happen next year. So I think Bobby won't win it this year, but it's kind of like the 2014 and 2015 Royals. Didn't win it in 2014, but 2015, you knew this was his year. This was y'all's year to win the World Series. I think next year will be the year Bobby wins the MVP, because I can see him doing the same thing he did this year if he stays healthy. So the MVP race, give it to Judge, and Witt will get a lot of votes, but next year is a year for him to get that award.
You know, go ahead, Blair. Were you going to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, I hope you're right about that. I hope this is sustainable for Bobby Witt. And I'm not saying it's not for Aaron Judge, but you're right. I mean, to have historic years, year after year after year, that's not in terms of like prodigious numbers, 55, whatever it is, 60 home runs that he's going to end up with, 140 to 150 RBIs. Those are Ruthian type of numbers, Barry Bonds type of numbers. Maybe Aaron Judge is capable of that. I don't know, but I agree with you, Jaylon. I do think that what we're seeing from Bobby Witt is sustainable. That he could be a 30 home run, a 30-30 guy for multiple seasons. That he can hit over 300, be a doubles guy. Sets the record this year, the Royals record for extra base hits. As of now, it's tied the record for total bases. He'll surpass that. Leads the American League in runs scored and batting average. I hope he can hang on and win and finish tops in both of those. So I think the great thing that Bobby Witt has going for him is he's 24 years old. He's still young, still strong, and I'd love to see him string together 4 or 5 more seasons of this level of play. Would be remarkable.
Blair, just to add to that, I would say, it's an interesting point that Jaylon makes, and you make about sustainability, but that Jaylon makes about whether there's some kind of, cumulative currency that you gain from doing it year in, year out that gives more, I don't know, a little more life to the vote. But let me go back to one point underlying the whole thing. And I do think Judge has enough of a distinction from Bobby in just the bat that it makes the case. And by the way, if you hear coughing in the background, that's the 2 dogs with kennel cough. They're okay. They're getting treatment, but it probably wasn't as much of a distraction as I just made it. But the thing is, this goes back a long ways to the very definition of the award. And I'm curious what you guys think about this. I do believe there's a difference between most valuable player and best player, or best stats and most valuable player. And I think that distinction is tethered to the idea of what a player means to his team, what it has done for that team. So it's a little simplistic, but if you took Judge off the Yankees and Witt off the Royals, who's hurt more? I think you could make a pretty good case that Bobby's been more instrumental to what the Royals do than Judge has necessarily been completely essential to the Yankees, although that might not be a great case. Maybe that's less of a good case than I think it is. But I guess what I wonder is how many people will consider the whole player as opposed to the obvious most gaudy aspects of the player.
That's a good point, because the Royals don't want to take Bobby out of the lineup at all. I mean, they hardly ever want to take him out the field. I think he DH'd one time this entire year, and that was a couple weeks ago. And that was like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. Bobby's not out on the field. You're right. He is everything to this team. He's everything in the offensive side at the plate. He's everything in the field or at shortstop. You take the Bobby Witt Jr. out the Royals lineup, if you swap him with Aaron Judge, are the Royals even at 82 wins right now? Or are they good but not great? I think that's the case, and that's a good point, Vahe, that you made.
Well, I'll say this. Yes, the Royals turnaround is epic, right? From 106 losses to 82 wins so far and counting, and have a chance to have one of the great turnarounds of all time. The Yankees were a 500 team last year and did not make the playoffs. And now they're going to have the best record in the American League, and Aaron Judge has been a big part of that. So that's just a little bit in defense of Aaron Judge's candidacy. I think he's done a great deal for his team this year. And of course he has Juan Soto, right? And
yes.
And the Royals don't have Vinny Pasquantino, which I wanted to get to. We're not going to have time to do that. Maybe next week's show, but big hole for the Royals missing Vinny this year. We can spend a whole segment on that, but we're out of time for today. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks to producers Randy Mason and Monty Davis for putting together this show, and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Jeff Rosen and Scott Chase. And tip of the cap to Jaylon Thompson and Vahe Gregorian for sharing their insights. Thanks for listening or watching. Let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review, rating, or a comment, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in and around Kansas City.